Welcome to Truth Report, the show dedicated to uncovering the deeper currents shaping our world. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers on global migration, not just through the headlines you expect, but by tracing the subtle, powerful forces that dictate human movement across continents and within nations.
From China's shifting economic priorities to the tragic fate of a tourist in conflict-ridden Chad, and the very biology of human resilience, we explore how seemingly unrelated events are deeply intertwined with the global narrative of immigration. It's a complex tapestry, and we're here to expose the hidden threads.
We'll examine how massive infrastructure projects can trigger internal migration, the outsized influence of corporate figures on public opinion, and the dangerous intersection of tourism and geopolitical instability at contested borders.
And we won't shy away from the critical role of media freedom in covering the front lines of immigration policy, or even the profound scientific insights into how the human body adapts to extreme stress, a reality for millions of migrants worldwide.
Tonight, we connect the dots, revealing how economic policy, celebrity culture, geopolitical tension, legal battles, and even neuroscience all converge on the urgent and universal story of immigration. Stay with us. First up, we turn our attention to an intriguing development out of China, reported by the South China Morning Post. Beijing is making a significant pivot, actively seeking private investment for major ultra-high-voltage power line projects.
This marks the first time such critical infrastructure schemes are opening up to non-state funding since a new directive was issued last November. The move signals a broader shift in China's economic strategy, aiming to channel private capital into areas previously dominated by state-owned enterprises.
On the surface, this sounds like pure economic policy, a shift from state-controlled enterprise to a mixed model. But when we dig deeper, these vast power lines are designed to funnel clean energy from China's resource-rich, sparsely populated western regions to the power-hungry industrial hubs in the east.
Exactly, Alex. This isn't just about electricity, it's about powering the engines of industrial growth that have historically acted as massive magnets for internal migration. Millions of rural Chinese citizens have moved east in search of work, creating vast migrant worker populations.
And the construction itself. Building vast power lines across thousands of kilometers of challenging terrain demands an immense labor force. This isn't just a technical project, it's a social engineering endeavor, necessitating the movement and coordination of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of workers.
These workers, often from poorer provinces, undertake grueling labor, living in temporary camps, far from their families. Their internal migration fuels the economy, but their personal sacrifices and lack of social safety nets are often overlooked in the grand narrative of national development.
Furthermore, the sparsely populated western regions often refer to areas inhabited by ethnic minority groups. While the article highlights clean energy, such large-scale infrastructure projects can lead to land requisition, displacement, and cultural disruption, potentially forcing internal migration or exacerbating existing tensions.
The promise of clean energy is laudable, but we must ask, at what human cost? Who benefits most from this shift to private capital? It's likely the private investors seeking lucrative returns and the industrial centers receiving cheaper power.
The losers are often the marginalized communities in the West whose ancestral lands may be traversed or impacted, and the migrant laborers whose lives are put on hold to build these vital arteries of power. Their contribution is immense, yet their voice in policy is often minimal.
This shift to private capital also raises questions about accountability. While private investment might bring efficiency, it can also prioritize profit over social and environmental protections, potentially intensifying the pressures that drive internal migration and resource conflicts.
It's a classic example of how national infrastructure, framed as economic progress, can profoundly shape demographic shifts, labor dynamics, and the human geography of a nation, acting as an invisible hand guiding millions of lives, sometimes against their will.
Moving now to a story that directly touches on the public discourse surrounding immigration, the condemnation of comments made by a co-owner of Manchester United. Al Jazeera reports that supporter groups and ordinary fans have spoken out against these remarks.
This isn't just about football, Maya. This is about the power of influential figures, especially those embedded in global cultural institutions like Manchester United, to shape public opinion on sensitive topics like immigration. Their words carry immense weight.
Exactly. A football club co-owner, by virtue of their position, commands a platform far beyond that of a typical private citizen. When they make comments on immigration, it immediately politicizes the club and forces fans to confront their values.
The condemnation from supporter groups is crucial here. It demonstrates that fans are not just passive consumers of sport, they are engaged citizens who hold their club's leadership to account on ethical and social issues. This is a form of grassroots activism against corporate influence.
It highlights the growing expectation that public figures, regardless of their primary industry, should exercise responsibility and empathy when discussing complex societal issues like immigration. The just sticking to sports argument is increasingly untenable.
The specific nature of the comments, though not detailed in this particular summary, clearly resonated negatively enough to provoke a strong backlash. This indicates a public sensitivity to rhetoric that is perceived as anti-immigrant or divisive.
This incident underscores how deeply immigration is woven into the social fabric, even impacting beloved cultural institutions. It forces a conversation about the values represented by global brands and the extent to which wealth translates into moral authority.
For many immigrants and their descendants, football clubs are powerful symbols of identity and belonging. When a club's leadership makes comments perceived as hostile to immigrants, it can be deeply alienating, questioning their place within that community.
The backlash serves as a reminder that public sentiment, especially among diverse fan bases, can push back against narratives that demonize or marginalize immigrant communities, forcing a recalibration of corporate messaging and public relations.
It's a fascinating microstudy in how globalized capital, cultural influence, and social conscience collide in the ongoing debate over immigration. The fans, in this case, are demanding a more inclusive and responsible stance from their club's leadership. Our next story takes us to Chad, where the South China Morning Post reports the tragic death of a 70-year-old French tourist, found after a fall near the Sudanese border. He was visiting for the International Festival of Saharan Cultures.
This incident, while tragic for the individual and his family, resonates far beyond the immediate circumstances. Chad is a nation grappling with immense geopolitical instability, particularly given its proximity to the ongoing conflict in Sudan.
Indeed. The tourist was found about 100 kilometers from the Sudan border. This region is not just a cultural melting pot for a festival, it's a volatile zone, a transit point for refugees, arms, and illicit trade, directly impacted by the instability next door.
The presence of a Saharan Cultures Festival highlights Chad's efforts to project an image of cultural richness and attract tourism, a vital economic lifeline for many developing nations. Yet, this aspiration exists against a backdrop of stark reality.
That reality is that Chad itself hosts hundreds of thousands of refugees, primarily from Sudan and the Central African Republic. The very borders a tourist crosses for leisure are often life-or-death thresholds for those fleeing conflict and persecution.
The death of a foreigner, even if accidental, can have broader implications for perceptions of security in the region. It can deter future tourism, impacting local economies that desperately rely on foreign visitors, thereby exacerbating existing vulnerabilities.
For migrants and refugees, the dangers are exponentially higher. They navigate these same landscapes, not with the protection of a tour group, but often alone, vulnerable to violence, exploitation, and the harsh environment, making their journeys inherently perilous.
This story starkly contrasts the privilege of leisure travel with the desperation of forced migration. One chooses to experience the Saharan cultures, the other is forced to traverse the Sahara to survive, often encountering similar dangers but without safety nets.
The incident underscores how porous and dangerous these borders are, not just for tourists, but for the countless individuals who cross them daily, either seeking refuge or attempting to make a living. It reveals the fragile security architecture of the region.
It's a somber reminder that in regions affected by conflict, the lines between tourism, cultural exchange, and humanitarian crisis are often blurred, and the risks are pervasive, impacting lives in profoundly different ways depending on one's circumstances. Next, we turn to the United States, where former CNN anchor Don Lemon is due to enter a plea in a Minnesota ICE protest case, as reported by the South China Morning Post. This case stems from his coverage of a protest against U.S. immigration crackdowns.
This is a critical story that intertwines media freedom, civil disobedience, and government policy on immigration. Don Lemon, now an independent journalist, live-streamed a protest against Trump's deployment of armed immigration agents.
The protest disrupted a church service, highlighting the desperation and moral conviction of those opposing the administration's aggressive immigration tactics. Churches have historically served as sanctuaries and sites of protest in civil rights movements.
The charges against Lemon, which, according to other reports, included disorderly conduct or trespassing, raise serious questions about the state's response to journalists covering protests, particularly those targeting government actions. Is it a legitimate charge, or an attempt to chill reporting?
This takes us back to the fundamental role of a free press in a democracy, to document, to question, and to hold power accountable. When journalists face legal repercussions for simply reporting on public demonstrations, it creates a chilling effect.
During the Trump administration, the deployment of federal agents, including ICE, into cities to enforce immigration laws was highly contentious. Protests were widespread, and journalists covering them were often caught in the crossfire, both literally and legally.
For immigration advocates, These protests were essential to draw attention to the human cost of policies like family separations and mass deportations. For the government, they were disruptions to public order, regardless of the underlying message.
This case underscores the inherent tension between the right to protest, the freedom of the press, and the state's power to enforce laws. It's a crucial battleground in the ongoing fight over immigration policy and civil liberties in the U.S.
The outcome of Lemon's plea and the broader legal proceedings will set precedents for how journalists are treated when covering politically charged events, especially those touching on immigration, which remains one of the most divisive issues in American society.
It's a reminder that the struggle for humane immigration policies isn't confined to legislative halls or border crossings. It plays out in city streets, in places of worship, and under the watchful eye of journalists who risk their own freedom to report the truth. Finally, we delve into a piece of scientific research from Nature, which reports that exercise rewires the brain, boosting the body's endurance. The study, involving mice, found that more exercise leads to more connections between neurons.
At first glance, this might seem entirely unrelated to immigration. However, when we consider the immense physical and psychological demands placed on migrants, this research takes on a profound significance.
Indeed. The journey of migration itself often requires extraordinary physical endurance, traversing dangerous landscapes, enduring harsh conditions, and facing uncertainty. But the endurance here isn't just physical, it's also mental and emotional.
Migrants often face immense stress, trauma from persecution or conflict, the arduousness of the journey, the challenge of integration, language barriers, discrimination, and the constant pressure of building a new life. This level of chronic stress impacts brain health.
This research suggests that physical activity, even seemingly simple exercise, could be a vital, accessible tool for migrants to build resilience, reduce stress, and improve cognitive function, aiding their ability to cope and adapt to new environments.
For policymakers and aid organizations, this isn't just an interesting scientific tidbit. It highlights the importance of providing opportunities for physical activity within refugee camps, detention centers, and integration programs. It's not a luxury, it's a critical support mechanism.
Imagine the potential. Access to exercise programs could help mitigate the severe mental health challenges faced by many migrants, including PTSD, depression, and anxiety, which are rampant among populations that have experienced profound trauma.
Investing in initiatives that promote physical well-being among migrant populations isn't just about physical health, it's about fostering mental resilience, enhancing cognitive flexibility, and improving overall capacity for successful integration into new societies.
The rewiring of the brain suggests a fundamental capacity for adaptation and growth, even under duress. This scientific finding speaks to the incredible human spirit of migrants who endure unimaginable hardship and still find ways to survive and rebuild.
It's a powerful reminder that our understanding of immigration must extend beyond politics and economics to include the fundamental biology of human survival and adaptation. Supporting the whole person, physically and mentally, is paramount.
This research, therefore, isn't just about mice on a treadmill. It's a beacon of hope and a call to action, urging us to consider the holistic needs of migrant populations and recognize the profound link between physical activity and mental resilience in the face of adversity. What we've seen tonight, Maya, is a mosaic of stories that, at first glance, appear disparate but are in fact deeply interconnected by the overarching theme of human movement and the forces that compel it.
From China's vast power lines sparking internal labor migration and potential displacement, to the tragic death of a tourist near a war-torn border that sees daily flows of refugees, the invisible hand of global forces guides human destinies.
We've witnessed the power of public opinion challenging corporate figures on immigration rhetoric, and the vital role of a free press in documenting the state's response to dissent over immigration policy. These are battles for the narrative, fought in courts and on social media.
And underpinning it all, the fundamental human capacity for resilience, highlighted by scientific research that shows how our brains adapt to stress, a stark reminder of the immense physical and mental endurance demanded of migrants worldwide.
These aren't just isolated events. They are threads in a global tapestry, revealing how economic policy, geopolitical instability, corporate influence, civil liberties, and even our biology converge to shape the complex, often challenging, landscape of immigration.
The truth is, every one of us is part of this story. Understanding these connections, challenging complacent narratives, and advocating for humane policies requires us to look beyond the headlines and demand a deeper, more empathetic understanding of the forces at play.
Our job at Truth Report is to uncover these connections, to give context to the chaos, and to remind you that behind every statistic and every policy, there are human lives profoundly affected.
Thank you for joining us on Truth Report. We encourage you to seek out these deeper connections in the news you consume and to question the narratives presented to you.
For Maya Clarity, I'm Alex Truth.